Are you currently trying to master the art of Brazilian waxing and you've officially reached the stage of frustration, overwhelm, and you're ready to quit because your waxes are taking way too long or your wax keeps breaking? Well, don't, because in today's video, I'm going to share 4 things you can start working on to improve your quality of wax and the timing of your service. For those of you that don't know, hi, my name is Amy, and I've been doing Brazilian waxes for close to a decade. So when I first started doing Brazilian waxes, I felt the same way. In fact, I had a model call and a friend of mine came in to be one of those models. It was not my day to wax. The wax was breaking. It was almost over an hour in the service. I finally had to swallow my pride and admit I wasn't going to be able to do this wax. I had to cut her out of the wax, and yes, I called my dad crying after she left. I really thought about quitting and just questioned my choice on could I even do this? Luckily, my dad told me, go home, sleep it off, and get back to work the next day. All right, so the first thing I want you to start working on is your posing. Not posing of you, posing of your client. Why does this matter? Well, if you're using the right poses, you can get access to the areas that you need to get to very easily, and you can work efficiently. The 3 poses I like to use in a Brazilian wax are butterfly, happy baby, and bunny tail. Now, a pose isn't just a pose. This is where you could actually start building a lot of trust with your client. For example, if your client is on the table and you're about to get them into the first pose, which is butterfly, what do you say to your client? Are you just telling them, go into butterfly? Do they even know what butterfly is? I'm sure some will, but some won't. And then what if they don't get into the right position? Then you have to correct them, and then you've got wax in your hand, and then the client's frustrated. So being able to coach your client efficiently into a pose is a huge time saver. Now, when you coach your client into the pose, it's very important to consider the language you're using. Are you saying open or spread? Because when a client's in a vulnerable position, that could be super intimidating to your client. Are you standing at the end of the table, or are you standing hip to hip with your client, making eye contact with them as you're coaching them? So, for example, I would coach butterfly. My hip would be where their hip is on the table. I would be looking directly at my client because I don't need to see where her feet are or where her legs are, because I know I'm going to be able to coach them into the position I want. So I would ask her to bend her knees and place her feet onto the table. Keeping the bottoms of her feet together, I'd get her to relax her hips, so allowing the knees to fall to the side. Boom, she's in butterfly pose. So using right language is going to build a lot of trust with the client, and it's going to get the client to relax just a little bit quicker. Moving on. The second thing I want you to think about is working in sections and mapping your Brazilian. When I do a Brazilian wax, I have 4 sections. I have the pubis, I have the labia, I have the in-between, and I have the labia. I always work in sections, so this is where my map comes in. If I'm working in section 1, which is the pubis, I am not touching the labia and I'm not switching up poses. So section 1 and 2, I use the butterfly pose. Section 3, I use happy baby. And section 4, the bunny tail, guess what? I use the bunny tail pose. Working in sections allows you to be efficient and not have you go back and forth in between poses, which can add a lot of time. Make sure that everything in section 1 is good to go before you move on to section 2. If you have to continually backtrack, you're going to add unnecessary time and you're going to slowly erode your client's trust in your ability to do a Brazilian wax. Next, I want to give you permission to play with different kinds of waxes. If you only have one kind of wax in your wax room, you're in for a world of trouble. My wax room, I have 3 different kinds of hard wax and 2 different kinds of strip wax. Why? Because there's different hair types and textures. Kind of hard wax I would use for a client that has really fine hair versus a client who has very dense, coarse, or thick hair is going to be very different. If I only have wax that's used for coarse hair, it's not going to pick up the hair for that fine-haired client. So you should have multiple waxes in your room. Other things that can affect your wax, obviously the quality, so invest in really good quality waxes, but your temperature or your climate could affect the wax. Some waxes work better in humid climates, whereas other waxes will work better in drier climates. So start to experiment and play to see what works best for you and your clients in the climate that you are in. And the last thing I would like you to really start thinking about and making sure you're doing is pinning the skin. I like to use a 3-point stretch. What do I mean by a 3-point stretch? So picture your client is in butterfly, and I want you to picture an inverted triangle. Your client's hands are going to be the base of that triangle. You'll place your client's hands just below the belly button to pull the skin taut. Your free hand that's not going to be removing wax is the tip of that triangle, so that's your pinning hand. In butterfly, you need to have your clients gently pulling on the skin to make sure that the skin is pinned. If you're not pinning the skin, when you go to remove and the skin, your client's skin has a lot of flexibility, this could be a reason why the wax is breaking. What about happy baby pose? Good question. So your client's hands don't need to be pulling anywhere because your client's hands will be on the back of the knees, pulling the knees towards the armpit in happy baby pose. The knees act like the base of the triangle as you pull the knees towards the armpits. This creates enough tension on the skin to create the perfect taut pull, and then your pinning hand would again pin the skin before you would remove the wax. In bunny tail, when the client is on the side, knees go towards the chest, client's top hand lifts the top booty cheek to lift and pin the skin. So I hope these tips have given you some insight on things that you could start working on to improve your timing and quality of wax. I really hope you don't get discouraged and keep at it because Brazilian waxing is an art for sure. And before I end this video, I want you to consider this. When you're doing a Brazilian wax, it doesn't matter how good you get, I always want you to think about what's something I could have done maybe just a little bit better. What's one thing I could have tweaked or one thing I could have said or one thing that I could have done for the client to improve their experience? If you do that every single time you do a wax, I promise you will become a master at Brazilian waxing in no time. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe to the Golden Peach Pro newsletter to get waxing tips delivered right to your inbox. Until next time, stay golden.